All right, so here we want to know how many students must attend the dance for the cost to be less than $40 per student. So it's important to realize that what I'm asking here is what's going to make the cost, y, less than 40. And so in order to figure out how many students, that means I'm looking for an x value, I've got to actually use my equation and solve for when that's going to be less than 40. So I know I'm looking for when 60 minus 5/10 x plus 600 over x is less than 40. And at this point, you're probably wondering how I'm going to start solving this, and it may seem familiar to you in the sense that we've solved for when a function is less than 0. And so in order to do that, we're going to subtract by 40 on both sides, and this is going to give us a much easier to work with situation where we're going to have 20 minus 5/10 x plus 600 over x is less than 0. At this point, I will challenge you to go ahead and pause and finish solving the inequality on your own and then check back. At this point, what we would like to do is understand what type of expression this is. And you'll notice that this expression here is nothing more than a rational expression, right? And the way that you might see that is you'll notice that I'm dividing by this x here. And so if I were to combine like terms, meaning if I were to create a common denominator and then combine, I'd have a really traditional rational function. So that's what I would encourage you to do. And at any point through the solution, when you feel like you're ready to give it a shot, pause, go ahead, solve it all the way through, and come back. So to do that, we're going to create a common denominator of x, which means that I'm going to have 20x over x minus 5/10 x squared over x plus 600 over x, and I want to know when that is less than 0. And now I can combine all my like terms because I have a denominator of x in each fraction, and I will also at the same time organize this with my leading exponent first, and I'm going to end up with negative 5/10 x squared plus 20x plus 600 all divided by x is less than 0. And now I'm in business because now I can find my critical points and I can analyze when my function is going to be less than 0, which of course will be telling me the values when my price is going to be less than $40. So my critical points are simply going to be where the function is either undefined or is at a root, is touching the x-axis or equal to 0. So it's clear to see that it's going to be undefined when x is equivalent to 0. I'll make my denominator 0. And then my next task is to figure out what will make my numerator 0, what will give me the roots. So I'm not going to actually do this right here because we've solved these many times before, but what will make my numerator 0? This is a quadratic, and I want to know what will make it equal to 0. Well, there's two options here. I can factor, or I can use the quadratic formula. If I were to use the quadratic formula, I'd find that the two values that make it 0 are negative 20 and positive 60. All right, so we'd like to know now where our function is going to either be positive or negative, right? In other words, when is it going to be less than 0? That's what we're looking for. Now you'll notice that I'm determining when x is less than 0, or when our function in terms of x is less than 0. Do I care about x values that are less than 0? The answer is no, right? That would mean there are negative students attending the dance, and hopefully it's not that bad of a dance, right? I'm expecting there to be a positive number of students attending, and so that's the only values that I'm going to consider. So if I plug in some number in between 0 and 60, and for our purposes, let's just use 1, right? If you were to plug in 1 here, 1 into your function, you can actually go back to your original function. That might make it easiest. If you plug in, right up here, if you plug in 1, what will you get? Well, you plug in 1, you're going to get 600 minus some small number over 1. And so it's going to be positive. And then when you plug in a number greater than 60, it's going to be negative. So the function is going to be less than 0 for all x values greater than 60. And I want you now to go ahead and stop and take stock of what does that actually mean in the context of our question here. What does that mean? Well, it means that when you sell more than 60 tickets, you have 60 students or more going to the dance, the cost of a ticket is going to be less than $40. So once again, if more than 60 students buy a ticket, the cost per student is going to be less than 40 because we set up our inequality, and then in solving, we're able to find the x values that satisfied our inequality.